You're welcome once again, and on this video I'll be showing you how to take body measurements. So you need to note that to take body measurement, we have the horizontal measurement and vertical measurement. I believe you know what horizontal lines are and vertical lines, but just in case you don't know, I'm going to show you. So these are what horizontal lines looks like. Any line going like this from right to the left is a horizontal line, or left, as long as it's just line like this, these are horizontal lines. While any line coming from top to down, that's coming straight like this, are vertical lines. Okay, as long as it is measured like this. Anything that will make you place your tape like this to measure, okay, these are vertical measurements. Okay, while for example from here to here like this, I want to take the length of this top, okay, and I'm placing the tape like this, it means I'm taking the vertical measurements. Then we have horizontal measurements, and the example of that is like I'm taking my bust circumference. Okay, I'm trying to note how what my bust measures. Okay, so you can see how my tape is lying flat like this, it means it is horizontal measurement. So I'm just going to be using this. I'm going to be using this to demonstrate how to take body measurements. So I'm just going to give you a general view of how to take a body measurement right on your client and measurements that are needed. Now, what you're making will determine what measurements you're taking. If, for example, I want to sew a blouse that ends here, okay, there's no way you see me measuring the legs. If I want to sew a trouser, there is no business with a trouser being on the chest. So it means my measurements will just be from the waist down to the end. Okay, so you need to note that. Okay, so the measurements we want to take are horizontal measurements, and I need you to take notes down just so you remember all these things. So horizontal measurements are straight line measurement like so, line like so. Okay, so this is how to take measurements right on your client. But when you want to do that, ensure that you're standing right by the side. Don't stay right in front of your client, because it will look so confrontational. Okay, so you better stay by the side like so, and you can ask your client to lift up her hand so you can take this measurement. So this is the horizontal measurement. So let's just take measurement needed to make a top. Please write that down. Measurement needed to make a top. For horizontal measurements, we have the bust measurement. Measurement needed to take a top. We're talking about horizontal measurements now. We have bust measurement, waist measurement, okay, and in most cases you should take the hip measurement as well, just because the top is going to end almost at the hips, except you're making a top that ends here, just like the one I'm wearing now. Okay, it ends at the hip, so you need to know how wide the hip is, so you're not making it too tight or too big and it doesn't look fitted. Okay, so these are measurements, horizontal measurements to make a top. And there is a straight line measurement. I will not really say it's a horizontal measurement, it's just a straight line measurement, which is from one shoulder bone to the other shoulder bone. You just note that down. So whatever you get, you note it down. So I believe you've watched the video on how to read a tape. If you've not, please go ahead to watch that video on how to read a tape. So when you're taking this measurement, whatever figure it ends, then you know that you're noting that down. If, for example, I want to take the bust measurement of this mannequin, okay, so right here on this point, wherever it meets the tape, you can see it meets the tape at 32.75 inches. Okay, almost 33 inches. Okay, so you can see that, okay, sorry, it meets at 32 inches. Okay, so wherever the end of the beginning of the tape stops and meets at this part, you note that down as the measurement. So if this line here meets this line here, I know that my measurement is at 32.5 inches. That is 32.5 inches. Okay, so that's just the way to take your measurement. The same thing for your waist, you note that down. Wherever this tape meets this tape, just note the line down. For this one, the waist, we have here 34. You can see the line is meeting this 24 here, meaning that the waist of this mannequin is 24 inches. That's how you do that for the waist measurement in taking a top. Okay, so we've talked about horizontal measurements. So the vertical measurement needed in taking the same top, that is the straight line measurement. Most time when you want to take vertical measurements, you are measuring for the length of that outfit. It can be the length of from the shoulder to the bust point. Okay, that's where the nipple is. Okay, so when we get into sewing, you're going to really understand why we need all these measurements. Okay, so from the shoulder to the bust point, you note that down. You can write on your book shoulder to bust. We have 9 inches here. You can write 9 inches or whatever you get on your client. Okay, so from shoulder to under bust, it depends on what you're making, like corset, bustier, you need an under bust measurement. But as a beginner, you may not exactly need that yet. Okay, so what we're going to be needing is from shoulder to bust, from shoulder to waist. Okay, so you're going to note your waistline. So there's something called a waistline. That is where your waist, that curve, that figure eight, everybody has it. I know it may look like some people seem not to know that they have it, maybe because of their stomach and all. But to get that, what you're going to do is to tie a rope around your waist and let your client tilt towards the right or the left. Okay, wherever you find sinking in, that is your waistline. Okay, so when you do that, when you tie a rope around your client, then um you can just measure from the shoulder now to that point where that rope is. That is the waistline for that client. Okay, you can have somebody do it for you. As a beginner, you may not know how to take your own measurement, so you could have someone do it for you. You could practice and do it on someone. So from shoulder to that waistline, and then from shoulder to the length of, that's how long you want that top to be. Okay, you're going to measure that. Of course, there's no standard to this. It's just how long you want it, your own personal preference. So if you're making a dress and you want to measure the length of that dress, if it's going to reach the knee, that means you're measuring from shoulder to the knee. Okay, but we've not gotten to dress, we're talking about top. Okay, so I believe you understand how to take that measurement. So I've given you measurement on how to take the horizontal and vertical measurement of a top. So let's move to measurements on how to how to take measurement of a skirt. Okay, so there are three basic measurements you'll be needing in making a skirt. You need the waist measurement or horizontal measurement, that's the waist circumference of your client to make a skirt. Okay, because you want to get the fit of what the waist measures. Okay, you also need the hip measurement. You're going to be placing your tape like so, right on the fullest part of the hips, and measure it. Wherever this point meets, you note that down. Just write it. You can write hip 36, 37, whatever you have marked. Okay, waist the same thing. And then the third measurement you need is the vertical measurement. That's the length from the waist to where that skirt is supposed to stop. So if you want a mini skirt, you could just measure where you want it to stop. Or if it's above the knee, you can measure it down. If it's below the knee, just measure it and note that there is no standard to this. You just note from that stem. I said you should tie a rope on your client's waist to get the actual waistline. So when you do that, you can now measure from that line to the leg, the length of the skirt. Okay, another thing that you may need to know as a beginner is to measure from here to get your hip line. Okay, although people get to use 8 or 9, but you can also measure it to just get the hip line. Okay, you're going to understand these lines when we move into other courses on how to note the lines. Okay, so this is basically how to take measurements. Next, we are going to be talking about how to place lines on the bodice, because when you want to draft your patterns, you're not just going to place this measurement anyhow on any place. You're going to need to place them on the actual lines. So I'm going to be showing you that. So you're going to need to practice on how to take measurements. If you have a mannequin, you could do that, but I'll advise you use an actual human, so that when you want to make a dress, you're using that measurement and see how that goes. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.